And thank you, Kelly. So yes, we are recording the meeting today. So if any of your friends or neighbors are not available for tonight, we will make the recording available, and there will be future opportunities for input as well. All right, so we're about 3 minutes in, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Chris, did you want to say a few words and maybe introduce the city staff that we have on the line today? You can unmute. She might be having trouble unmuting. Oh, there you go.
There we go. I'm unmuting now. I'll have people just because there's a lot of people on here, so I'm not sure who from staff is here other than I see JJ and Sergeant Hule. So I'm Chris Aldevar. I'm Public Works Manager, Traffic Transportation Manager here at City of Tustin. I do take care of the permit parking initial steps as far as getting permit parking in your neighborhood or on your street per the current policy. I'll have Emily kind of go through why we're doing this and why we're updating it. And we have actually asked a consultant to help us along with this process because it's gotten a little bit complicated with some of the legislation that's come down from Sacramento. So if anybody from city staff is here, if you can speak up and let us know that you're here. JJ, want to start?
Yes, this is JJ Garzone and Sergeant Hull. We work for traffic. I actually oversee the system currently, and we're here to answer any questions if needed.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else from the city on the line?
I think I'm getting a couple of emails with people not being able to log on. Let me see what their issues are. Oh, you know, Emily, do we have a capacity on this?
They have, that's never happened before. We may
yeah, because I guess the error message that they're getting is that it has reached the 100-person capacity. So that's why we haven't been able to get above 100 participants.
Oh, okay. Kelly, is there a way to upgrade the capacity?
I will look into that right now. Yeah, we've never hit 100 before, yeah. So that's a very impressive.
We let them know that we're checking into it.
We are looking into that. Hopefully we can get that updated now so people can join. And if anyone isn't able to join, there will be other meetings, and we are doing an online survey as well with a chance to provide open-ended feedback. So hopefully we're able to get this opened up. I did think it was strange that we hit 100 on the dot, so that explains why.
Yeah. We were getting above that. So I've gotten at least 5 emails.
Could you maybe go over what this meeting's about so the people that it doesn't involve could maybe remove themselves?
Sure.
Yeah,
so today I'm just going to launch into a brief presentation, and then we really want to hear from all of you. Our focus today is to talk about residential parking in Tustin. We're going to just give a brief overview of our project, and then I'm going to open it up to, we basically want to hear from you all and dedicate the majority of our time to listening to what parking challenges or priorities that you all have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Kelly, if you could give me a thumbs up if that looks good. All right, so thank you all so much for sharing your evening with us to talk about parking. We do have a Spanish translator with us today as well, Monica Espinoza, and so if anyone needs help with that, please just speak up and Monica can be of assistance. We also did include some Spanish translation on the actual slides, so hopefully that's helpful as well. Just to kind of introduce myself, I'm one of the parking consultants working with the city with Dixon Resources Unlimited. My name is Emily Quatinetz. I'm a senior associate and I've been with the company for the past 5 years, and I have a background in urban planning, worked with communities all over the country, especially in California, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I'm joined here today with my colleague, Kelly Dugdale, who will be assisting with the chat box and monitoring that. And she is here to help take notes as well. So I'm going to just move on. So just to give you a little bit of background about our company, we're a consulting firm that specializes in parking and transportation. And our specialty is really in technology and operations. And so we also not only put together recommendations, in many cases, we're also brought on to help implement the solution. So I like to think that that helps us come up with more realistic solutions. As you can see over on the right, oh, my thing just went blank. Let me try this again. Bear with me one moment. There, can you see that okay?
Yeah, it looks good now.
Okay, so over here on the right, we have a list of some of our clients. As you can see, we heavily focus in the California region. We're actually working with Norwalk and Costa Mesa right now, as well as Pasadena. But I do want to acknowledge that every community is so different, and we really want us to stay away from doing any kind of cookie cutter solutions. That's why it's so important for us to hear from all of you today. And I'm sorry, I don't know if that is showing up on your screen. It keeps whiting out on my end, so I apologize if that's happening on your end, but we will post the slides after the fact on the city website and share that, so it'll all be accessible to you after the fact, as well as the meeting recording. I do ask that everyone stay muted throughout the presentation, and if you do have any questions or comments, to take advantage of the chat box, which Kelly will be monitoring throughout the presentation. So just to give you an overview of this meeting today, I'm just going to talk about our project and then give you an overview of some general parking theories and best practices. And then we'll spend the majority of our time on the parking magic wand discussion. And just to kind of give you a heads up, I will be asking everyone, basically, if you had a parking magic wand and you could change, fix, or improve anything about residential parking in Tustin, what would you do? So I want you all to give that some thought as I'm going through the rest of the presentation. And I'm hoping that, I know we do have a lot of people joining today, but I'm hoping that we'll have a chance for everyone to speak. And so here's an overview of the parking study objectives. It's really important that we actively engage the stakeholders, and there will be additional opportunities for feedback throughout the process. Is the white flashing happening on your end?
It is, and I'm wondering if we might be having an issue with someone in the meeting trying to play with the controls. So just want to put that out there, that we really need to focus on parking during this meeting. I would really appreciate that.
We
Everyone
can
could
see
focus
the
on that.
screen. I think what it is, it's you guys as admin, you have the white screen, but we can see it.
Okay.
Okay, as long as everyone can see it, that's great. Okay, so moving on, we're also here to we want to holistically address the parking challenges. So rather than putting a Band-Aid solution and just pushing the problem around, it's really important that we look at this holistically and comprehensively so we can figure out a solution that's going to work for all of Tustin and not just push the problem from one neighborhood to the next. And so one of the big focuses of our study is the Preferential Permit Parking Program. And so the residential parking, some of you may be familiar with that. Maybe some of you are permit holders and will definitely want to hear your experience with that. Or maybe you live in a neighborhood that's adjacent to a permit neighborhood and parking on your block is really full and at capacity. And so we really want to hear from all of you what your experience is, because we don't live in Tustin. So it's important for us to hear that from you. And then my screen has gone blank, so I apologize for that. Let me just try and reshare this real quick. Sorry for this. Just bear with me. So here's an overview of our project timeline. We have done an operational needs assessment. So we came on site for the graveyard shift, got to do some ride-alongs. We've done a ton of research on different comparable cities to understand what are their residential permit programs like. And this is actually our first community meeting. And so there will be 2 additional community meetings. We are going to be basically coming back to you with some draft and preliminary recommendations. At this point in the project, we're still very early on. And so none of the recommendations have been drafted. We wanted to hear from all of you first and conduct our online survey, which actually just went live 1 week ago. And we already have 640 responses. So that's very encouraging in just a week. And that survey is actually going to be live online through the end of this month. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, to take that online survey, push it out, encourage your neighbors to take it, post it on Nextdoor. We really want to reach as many people as possible. And I'm also going to ask Kelly if you could post the link to the online survey in the chat box. We also have it here on the slide, and it'll be available on the city's website. So please, please, please help spread the word. We want to reach as many of you as possible. Once we come back with our draft recommendations, there will be 2 other community meetings before we finalize that. And I'll get into timing in a moment as well. So it's really important that we understand what are Tustin's needs so we can put you on that path and come up with a very viable long-term solution. So we need to be mindful of what are your immediate parking management objectives and being able to prepare for the long term. So it's really important that we consider the end user experience. So not only should the solution work for you all, the community, we also need to think about that the city is managing the different solutions as well. And so customer service is really key. And I know it's kind of silly to compare parking management and customer service, but we really truly want it to be a positive experience. And we always talk about if you can make parking easy, convenient, and accessible, if you're hitting those 3 things, then that is a very solid program. And so it's helpful to keep those 3 things in mind throughout the process. Another thing too, as we're putting together our plan, we don't have a crystal ball. And so we want to make sure we're putting you on that path and putting together a solution that's adaptable to those needs, making those incremental adjustments over time, taking into account that technology is changing at a very rapid speed. And so any recommendations that we put together, we basically, we've got some people trying to share. Sorry about that. Kelly, is there a way to limit it to 1 person who can share?
Yes, actually, you should be the only person who's able to share at a time. So we are definitely getting some people who are working around that.
So as I was talking about, it's really important that we make those incremental investments and we take a phased approach to parking management so we can adapt over time. Like I mentioned earlier, it's really important that we avoid Band-Aid solutions because they can become very overwhelming to manage. So often communities we run into where they see a problem parking area and they just put in a parking meter or they put in a permit restriction, and that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It can just push it from one neighborhood to the next. And so we need to look at this comprehensively so we're not just chasing the tail around. We often talk about the squeeze the balloon theory, where you squeeze the balloon and then it starts to pop out in different areas. And so it's important to consider the whole holistic area of that solution and that we be proactive rather than reactive. So a big part of that approach is making sure that we're making data-driven decisions and that we're accurately identifying what is the core root of this issue. So we're not just putting on the Band-Aid, but we're understanding, what is really truly going on, and not just reacting to those perceptions, but taking into account the reality of that. And a big piece of that too is the importance of parking enforcement. And we actually like to call it compliance, because it's not about, papering the city with tickets. We want people to follow the rules. We want to make parking easy, and we want to give people a place to park. And so we know it's so important especially for you all in your residential neighborhoods, making sure that you have somewhere that's easy, convenient, and accessible. But having that consistent enforcement is really important for that compliance, so we can truly understand what the current policies are, the impact of the current policies, the impact of the current permit program, and then being able to make those incremental adjustments over time and measure the true impact of those. So moving on, just briefly, I wanted to touch on a few different methods of managing permit programs. Even just in California, there's so many different ways that the permit programs are structured. So there really are a lot of options for us to consider, and we haven't settled on anything yet today. None of our recommendations have been drafted. So these are just some high-level considerations. A lot of communities are transitioning to what we call virtual permits. So rather than having a physical hang tag or a decal, the license plate number in many cases is becoming essentially your parking permit. So it takes away the need for that physical permit. So you're not damaging your bumper with the sticker or having to worry about the hang tag. So it can become that permit identifier, and then enforcement is basically able to track that using a camera. We also basically see a lot of different programs where you might have a different zone, a permit zone per neighborhood. The policies may differ per zone because every neighborhood might have different challenges and needs, whether it be the need for an overnight parking permit program like what you have today, or in some areas that are maybe nearby a commercial area or a transit stop and have spillover parking impacts, coming up with policies that are customized to that particular zone to help manage that impact. Many communities also basically implement a maximum number of permits per zone or per household. And this can really vary across the board. And sometimes it becomes important in areas where you have a super high amount of demand. But you often run into the issue of, neighbors versus neighbors. And if you have a really dense neighborhood, how do you decide who gets the permits or how many permits per household? And I'll talk about this more in a moment too, but for those of you who are not familiar with the 2016 Attorney General opinion, basically it was stated that that it's recommended that you don't distinguish between dwelling type for your permit parking program. So right now we know in Tustin, except for a few exceptions, the majority of the permit zones are for single family homes. And so considering how we might come up with a more equitable program that's more in line with that AG opinion from 2016. If you have not seen it, I highly encourage you to check that out. Another common strategy we see is escalating permit rates. So maybe considering giving away the first permit for free and then a higher rate for the second and third permits. There's many different ways to structure the rates in order to encourage people to utilize the parking that they have on their property if it's available to them, and to encourage people to reduce their car ownership rates if at all possible. But being mindful that not every area is accessible to transit, and some people do rely on their cars to get to goods and services. And so we need to come up with a more balanced approach that takes all of that into consideration. Another thing to consider is the new development parking ratios. And so the development code does require a certain number of parking stalls be provided with new developments, and a lot of communities are actually waiving this. And for those of you who aren't familiar with AB 1401, I recommend you check that out as well. It's moving really quickly through. This is a statewide assembly bill, and basically it applies to residential and commercial development. The first reading was in June, and essentially it would remove parking minimums for new developments for any parcel within half of a mile of a transit stop. And they basically define transit stop as anything like a bus rapid transit station or you could have multiple lines that are with 15-minute frequency or less. And so it's pretty open-ended, and that could have significant impacts throughout the state if it is passed. And so I highly recommend that you track that, because that could impact how much parking is built in new developments throughout California. And then moving on, we also have a few different considerations for Tustin. We know that there are some neighborhoods that are highly impacted, and that demand isn't always evenly distributed. Maybe you have one street that has a permit zone that's underutilized, and then a neighboring street that's totally impacted. And so trying to consider that comprehensive approach and the different site-specific considerations. It's also important that we consider equity in the solution. As I mentioned, that 2016 AG opinion, and not distinguishing based on dwelling type and what types of impacts that might have. Customer experience, as I mentioned earlier, is really important. And also a big consideration in this project is not only how are we going to adjust the policies potentially, but how are we going to enforce that and operate the program in a more efficient manner. And then just keeping in mind that state legislation that I mentioned earlier, the AB 1401. So here's just an overview of our project approach with some estimated timing. The online survey is live through the end of this month. So please help spread the word to your neighbors. And Kelly has posted the link in the chat box. If you don't already have it, please take a look over there. We also are anticipating that we'll be coming back sometime, likely in early September, for our next community meeting. And by then we'll be able to share the results of the online survey and start to talk about some of our preliminary draft recommendations. So that'll be a really good one. I highly encourage you to keep an eye out for that. We'll also be returning sometime likely in late October. I know these online forums can be a little bit tricky sometimes, so we're really hoping that we'll be able to do some of that in person as well. And then we will be coming back with our final recommendations for permit policies and procedures, and that'll be sometime likely in the winter. So that's just a brief overview. And then the rest of our time today, we're scheduled to go until 7:30. And so I'd like to dedicate the rest of our time to the parking magic wand exercise. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have we're gonna basically hope to have everyone talk. I know there's a lot of people. We have basically 100 attendees right now so far. And so if we're not able to get through everyone, I will say there is the parking magic wand question on the online survey as well. And so there's a chance to expand on there, or maybe if there's something that you forgot to mention today, you can always add it in there. We'll be reading through all of your responses to that survey. And so I highly encourage it. And I also just want to ask that everyone be respectful of each other's opinions. You know, not everyone has the same parking experience or the same priorities. And so if yours differs from someone else's, I just really ask that you be respectful. We really want to hear from all of you today. You hopefully will all have a chance to speak. And since we do have so many people, we're going to have to move a little bit quickly through it. So I ask that you keep your magic wand response brief, maybe just pick one priority item. And then if we have time at the end, we can circle back around and come back to everyone. And you're also welcome to leverage the chat box as well. We will download those responses as well. So with that, before we launch in, just the last slide here is our contact information. We highly encourage you to drop us an email if you have additional information that you want to share, or if there's something that is maybe more site specific and you want our eyes on it, then please send us an email. Kelly will post our contact information in the chat box as well. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we can launch into the magic wand. All right. So I'm just going to go down the list as it shows up on my end. And when I call your name on here, if you could just unmute yourself and then introduce yourself to the group and then share if you had a parking magic wand, what would you change, fix, or improve about residential parking in Tustin? So the first person I see here is Pertivet. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Pertvedt.
That is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you for
So I have actually lived in several, well, at least 2 neighborhoods in Tustin. And in one neighborhood, there would be hardly any cars on the street at all, parked on the street. It would be if a resident had, one additional car for whatever reason, past spouse or something like that. And now I live in another neighborhood in the city of Tustin, and it's a quarter of a mile away. And people come in here and they have to, and I'm thinking, oh, do they live in the neighborhood? Well, how do they need to have somebody pick them up? So they have a car come and pick them up from where they parked the car. They obviously live far away. And the magic wand question there is, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to see if, people wouldn't leave their cars for sometimes a whole week, on my block, maybe right in front of my house. And, I know they were picked up by another car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we often hear that, especially around airports, where people will dump their car and then leave it there for an extended period. So thank you so much for sharing that today. Let's move
So
on.
just to follow up too, I think that one way, you talk about immediate measures that can be taken. One would maybe be to, just mark the cars, right? Drive up and down the street whenever there's, Thursday, there's cleaning on one side, Friday, there's cleaning on the other side.
Mhm.
Everybody, move their cars from one side to the other. We'll mark the cars and make sure that they leave by Saturday, or, if they're on if they're on the Friday cleaning side, so they don't sit there all weekend and all of that. That I think that would be an immediate. That all it takes is somebody to go by with a chalk and mark each tire. And I know, I don't want my neighbors told, but people that live, people that don't live a walking distance away.
And maybe Jeff Thompson, if you're on the line, maybe you could speak to that topic for a minute.
Sure. I think if I was to look at a magic wand, I would just want to be able to park in front of my home. I can't do that anymore without being strategic for how I can get the space. I think sometimes I have difficulty putting my trash cans out in front, or when I do put the trash cans out in front, people park so close that the trash won't pick it up. And invariably what happens is my son has to park down the street, which seems kind of ironic.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any, Jeff, while we're on you, did you have any other magic wand asks to share with the group?
Yeah, I think we all desire balance within this program. So I don't know if that's so much of a magic wand, but just an achievable goal. How do you balance it? And of course, we're right on the edge of Old Town. So we have densities of 2 to 3 houses per acre. And yet across the street, we'll have densities of 20 units per acre. And so it's really hard to compete, and it shouldn't be a competition, but it becomes that. And I wish it wasn't there because we're all neighbors. But I think that's where the city needs to really come in and make sure that on-site spaces are available and aren't being restricted by condominium associations who hold them very tight. And so I think there's a lot of things like that that can be looked at.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying in your particular neighborhood, there's a lot more density nearby, and it sounds like those residents are not allowed to participate in the permit program. Is that your understanding?
No, they're very much able to participate in the program. And I think the difficulty is when you have the densities of 20 units to the acre, there's just going to be more cars. And so, and it naturally spills out onto the streets, but then it takes away from parking that we used to have. And so, the city needs to find a way to strike that balance of how do you achieve that? And so, because right now we don't have balance, but if you go around the corner, I think like others might have said, some streets are just fine. They don't have a parking problem. And so they're probably wondering, why in the world do we have a parking permit program? I can park anywhere I need to, and now I can't park the way I used to. And so I can see why there's a huge imbalance. And the thing that we haven't talked about today that we really need to recognize is we also have these industrial commercial areas, and they're not regulated at all. And so sometimes they bring in an avalanche of parking when their businesses are open. And then when they're not, then it goes back to flocking to parking in front of those curbs. And so I think that you get into people carpooling to drop off their cars to then drive to wherever they might live because it's too far to walk. And that's where you just get a lot of inconsistencies and what appears to be mayhem on parking. And at the end of the day, how do you protect Old Town? Because Old Town's a pretty special place, but I also love the vibrancy that we've seen with some of the newer developments because they're bringing in foot traffic, which is wonderful to see. And it's great to see families coming back in. So how do you protect Old Town while at the same time making sure that that vibrancy is continued to be encouraged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Let's move on. I see a Joanne on the list. If you're here.
Yes,
There you
I'm
are.
here.
For you.
Okay. I've lived in Tustin for a long time. And so I live in a single unit. It's a house. These are all separate houses. And I also have noticed over the last year that people coming in and parking on the street and someone picking them up and then coming in the morning. And I would imagine many of those people live in apartments and other places where they, when the developer built them, he did not take into account that there'd be more than 2 people live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So I'm thinking at this point, the city of Tustin needs to look ahead if they are going to allow more units to be built to make sure that those that are built they have enough parking. But I also believe that the city of Tustin can be at the forefront and build parking structures just for those people that cannot find a place to park on a regular basis. And, if that's what's coming, more people are coming, more cars are coming, we have to find a way to make it work. And it's not by parking in residential areas and dropping off your car because we will run out of room. In fact, in my little area, we have run out of room because we're right off Red Hill. So, that's where a lot of people come. So I think the city of Tustin needs to build some parking structures. If I could wave a wand, that would be it.
Yes, it would be nice to have a magic wand. I do want to ask a follow-up question. In your opinion, Joanne, if the city were to build a parking garage, is that something that you think residents would pay for parking in the garage? And the reason why I ask is just because it is very expensive, not only to build a garage, but also to maintain it over time. So is that something that you think residents would be willing to pay for if it were a resource?
Well, maybe not residents necessarily, but the apartment buildings, they could just put that into, if you want a parking spot and it's not located here, you can put that into your lease so that the people that are living there at least will know that they have a place that they can park their car at night. Because I imagine they're driving around looking for parking spots. So, you know, the apartment units could absorb, or the condos associations. I don't know. I, as a resident, in order to be able to park on my own street, might be willing to pay a little bit more, but I also think we need to look at the developers, because there is one place called the Groves that is got 80 units in it. It's for people who need to be in rehab, older people. There are 10 parking spots. There's 16. One's handicapped, 10 are for people that come to visit the 80 people that are there. And then there are 7 reserved for the employees. So whoever agreed to that kind of parking, I don't, got it through the planning commission, that, you know, I had to go park on somebody's street in order to go visit somebody there. So the planning commission needs to be looking at how many people might be living in the apartment, and then make their decision about how many parking spots are required.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. And this is why I did mention earlier the importance of tracking that AB 1401, that assembly bill, because unfortunately it might be out of the planning commission's control how much parking is built with new developments. If that ends up passing, developments anywhere within half of a mile of a transit stop would not be required to provide any parking. So that could obviously have a tremendous impact, and we will be keeping an eye on that throughout the process. So thank you so much for sharing. Let's move over to Nina DeLu.
Hello, and thank you for hosting this. You're going to hear the concerts in the park in the background because I live directly across the street from Pepper Tree Park on South B Street. And I wanted to talk today a little bit about what we had before the parking permits and what we have now, and then I'll wave my magic wand. So before, we were most definitely seeing people dumping their cars in front of our house. We were seeing illegal street racing cars that were being dumped on our street, left for weeks on end, and never getting towed away until I would pester and pester for them to be towed. That's all cleared up with parking permits. So they've done something good. Do I like them? Not really. And the reasons why I don't like them is because they're kind of hard to go through the process of getting. I don't really think that you guys should be limiting how many parking permits I get in front of my own house. I bought this years later, we've got limits. I just don't think that I should have to out of pocket the cost of my house. And I should not be restricted on how many parking permits either myself or my tenants get. There's now nobody parking on the street. There's virtually nobody parking on my street because of the permit situation. So why are we limiting the number of permits? It doesn't make any sense. Waving the magic wand here, I would say, just look, the permit program's okay with me. I'd rather see it go away, but here we are, we have it. It has made some improvements in the neighborhood. Now just stop all these limitations. This should be a super easy process for me to get a permit to park in front of my own house. It should be easy for my wife and for anybody else in my family to get as many permits as we need for our vehicles.
So
We're
am I on
residents
mute
here.
or my hand?
Oh,
Charlie's not on mute.
someone, you can,
So that's kind of, you know, my 2 cents is stop the limitations. There's no reason why we should be limiting the number of permits when there's no one out here parking anymore, because nobody wants to out of pocket the $50 fee. We're all cramming our cars into our driveways. We're stacking up so that we don't have to pay these fees. This is ridiculous. It's a super hard process. To make it easier, remove the restrictions on, oh, is our garage used? Are our driveways used? Just give us the permit. If I request a permit, I should be able to have one, and that's all.
thank you so much for sharing. You did mention it was hard to get the permits. Is there something about the online portal that you think maybe could be improved, or anything in particular that stood out to you that made the process difficult?
No, I can honestly say, JJ's a pleasure to work with, and but there's a lot of restrictions based on our own properties, and it feels a little invasive. I'm not going to lie. You've got to come and check my property to see how I'm using my parking in order for me to get a parking permit out in front.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I don't think it's warranted. I don't think it's a good expenditure on our city resources to be doing this. Make it more simplistic in that fashion, in that you remove the restrictions for how many permits residents can get. You show your residency, you prove it with your driver's license. Maybe you need a lease, maybe you need a bill, but that's, let's get that all kind of stuff we can upload virtually, and then you get us our permit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Let's move on to Sandra Ha.
How do I raise my hand?
Darlene,
Hi.
You can raise your hand. There should be a button to do so, or you can post in the chat box. But I will ask that you stay muted for now.
Okay,
We'll definitely get to you soon. We're trying to get through everyone on the list.
okay.
So
I don't
let's.
know how to raise, just know I want to talk. So that's
Okay, yes, we'll definitely get to you. Thank you.
We had, Emily, real quick, we had one other person who was also having trouble raising their hand. So maybe after Sandra goes, we can go to a couple people who are having trouble raising their hand.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's start with Sandra. Thank you.
Hi, I currently live in Tustin Fields too. I purchased my property brand new. I've lived there 16 years. Tustin Fields 1 is across the street from us. And they allow people to park in our neighborhood, causing us not to have our own spaces in front of our house. They have people park, they rent rooms or don't use their garages. And so they use our neighborhood for their overflow. And I need to find a resolution for this. We don't use permits. We don't have that problem, anything to do with permits. But we do have a parking issue, and our HOA doesn't do things. We tell the Tustin Fields 1 not to park in front of our homes. We let them know that there's signs that say they will be towed, but they just blatantly ignore that. So I need some advice to how I can go about getting some resolutions on this.
And Sandra, if I may be mistaken, but based on where you're living, I believe that actually might be those might be private streets. And if that's the case, I suggest that you reach out to your HOA.
I have.
Okay.
And then I contacted your office because you guys are posting in front of our homes to come to this meeting, and you sent mailers, and you guys then directed us to the planning company. The planning company then directed us to the police, and the police back to the HOA. But again, it's not resolved. We're just sent everywhere, and no one handles the issue. The issue is other neighborhoods are parking in ours. What can we do as a homeowner to stop this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you being here, and I'm sorry that I don't have the answers for you today, but we definitely are hopefully going to be able to address maybe some of the surrounding locations, and that would hopefully mitigate some of the challenges you are having. And then Kelly, you mentioned that there were a few folks that were having trouble raising their hand.
Yeah, I got a message from John Garay, who said he was having trouble raising his hand a bit ago. I want to invite him to speak if he's still on the call.
I am on the call, but
there we go.
So,
hi. My name is John. I represent Sycamore Gardens on Sycamore and Newport, 100 units. We've been trying now for 5 years to get permit parking. We've been shooed away time and time again because we're a condominium and not a single family home. A lot of this is going to stem from what citizens and people's policies are. Is parking something that belongs to the community that it's in front of? Because you have a bunch of outdated housing from the 60s that were built with that street parking in mind. Yet you have a bunch of other housing units that were either single family homes or units built in the 80s that are planned communities. So a lot of that outdated housing is where you're seeing these problems, along with Newport, Red Hill, Irvine Boulevard, which got widened when the streets were for 2 lanes to 3 lanes. A lot of these homes lost the parking that they used to have. Now there's a lot of solutions, and once you figure out, does that parking belong to those homes or not, what technology is there? Because right now a physical permit system is expensive, it's time consuming, not all areas get patrolled. Now, when they changed the policy in 2008, single family homes used to get 4 permits, no questions asked. In those staff reports, it states that everybody just put their cars in the street and there was a different type of parking problem. So it's kind of now time to go the way of other cities. Other cities are moving to permitless programs with cameras on the cars. This whole long list of people calling in cars that have been there for 72 hours is ridiculous. It's a waste of resources, especially when those cars can be scanned on a daily basis. The technology is there, and especially for condominiums, it's all about limits. I currently live in an area where there's a bunch of fourplexes and none of them use their garages. While we have carports, we can easily monitor, who uses them and cite them with a HOA correction notice if need be. But that's really what it comes to, is setting caps in regions. In our area, there shouldn't be a household with 7 people in it and 9 cars, which is what's happening. Or a single family home that skirts their 4-car requirement by putting cars in an adjacent street. So while they have an empty street, they're having their home barbecues while the very next street is suffering. So these are all things that just need to be addressed and finally caught up with. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. And just to elaborate a bit on what you touched on, is this concept of virtual permits that I mentioned earlier, where the license plate number can become your permit, basically?
That's what I was talking about, but I was kicked out of the meeting like right as it started, so I didn't.
Okay. Yeah. And just for everyone else in the group, a lot of cities are transitioning to that type of program. And a big benefit of that is not only is it more convenient for you as residents, it's also more efficient to enforce using the cameras, because instead of having to visually verify every single permit, it's basically just automates that process. And they can cover a lot more ground in less time. And so with more enforcement coverage and consistency, that can really help monitor for things like the 72-hour rule and make that much more efficient to track and enforce. And so a lot of cities have been transitioning to that type of tool for parking enforcement. And of course, with that comes a lot of other considerations like data retention and privacy, which are important to consider as well. Looks like, and
sorry to interrupt. There was one last thing. If you were to move to a zone-based structure, are the zones that were in the survey, is that what you'd be considering? Or was that just for data purposes?
The survey is just for data purposes at this point. We haven't developed our recommendations. It's early in the process. So at this point, that has not been determined, but I do want to just remind everyone that we do have a Spanish translator here as well. And so if anyone is listening in and needs support, please let us know. And she's also keeping an eye on the chat. So let's move on. I see a few others with their hands raised. How about Jimmy O? Are you here today?
Yes, it's actually Jamie.
Jamie.
Yeah, no worries. I get that all the time. Hi, so my name is Jamie, and I live off of San Juan and Red Hill. I live in a 9-unit like townhome type of thing, and we have parking available, but I know other tenants tend to park on the street, and typically for us, it's not an issue to find parking. But I do understand that, you know, not every neighborhood is as lucky as us where we are able to park on the street and we don't have like different people from other cities dumping in cars. So I'm not too familiar on how the permit works. I'm probably not the time to like be asking these questions, but I'll educate myself outside of this meeting or something. But just the thing is, you know, someone mentioned in the call that the parking structures could be built, and I see a lot of land here in Tustin that could be used for that. Well, I don't know how paying that would work, but if you are implementing something where like you don't limit the parking permits per family, then I feel like it doesn't make sense to have it, because now someone from that has like 10 people living in like a 2-bedroom can apply for their 10 cars. And now you have an issue again on the street. So I don't know if there's a limit. But my thing is just looking at different land that's available around here. And I'm pretty sure that people would rather pay for that than deal with like a citation. But yeah, so those are my 2 cents. I also was kind of confused because I didn't know parking was an issue in Tustin. But again, it's because I don't live in the area where it's a huge issue. But I did the survey, and I saw that my area was like a zone where you are trying to implement that. So I just talked to some of my neighbors, and some of them did not get a flyer. So I don't know if you're gonna have like another meeting, because I know some could not make it because it is like they're at work or something. But yeah, I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, we will have at least 2 more meetings. We did send out flyers, I believe, to every address, so I apologize that it didn't reach everyone. But we will have additional opportunities for input. And of course, we encourage you to share the online survey as well. And I did want to address one thing that you brought up in terms of utilizing land space. One of the common topics that's brought up is actually the concept of shared parking. And this is becoming more and more common, especially in California, is if you have an existing parking lot somewhere, maybe it's privately owned, such as a school or like a church parking lot, or you might have a school or a post office where the lot is underutilized at certain points during the day or the evening. And during those off-peak times, there could be an opportunity to go put in place a shared parking agreement that residents would be able to basically leverage that for permit parking or for additional parking resources in an area. So that's a really great way to really optimize the use of existing space without having to go through the expense of building a parking structure. And so if anyone can think of a particular location that we should maybe consider in your neighborhood that might help ease the parking demand and provide some more capacity, definitely send us an email, and we'll definitely start to evaluate those types of sites, and we can broker an introduction and try and reach out to them and see if that might be a potential. So keep that in mind. We want to look at all options for parking, and so we can make the most out of the space that already exists today. So let's move on. I see Rob Allen with your hand up. And Rob, if you're talking, I can't hear you. It shows you unmuted, so it's possible that your microphone is having challenges. Rob, I'm going to move on to the next person, but I'll try and come back to you. If not, please post whatever your magic wand response is in the chat. I'm sorry we weren't able to hear you today. Let's move on to Marco Popovich.
Yes, I'm here. First of all, I want to thank you guys for actually putting this together. It shows that you care about our community and want to resolve any issues that are out there. So, Emily, thanks to you and your team for this. Number 2, I didn't realize actually there are so many different issues. But for the issue that I initially had was the one that Nina actually hit on the nose, where we're trying to make sure that in our small community here on Walnut and Sycamore, that people that live in apartments across the street park in their apartment parking and not in the residential parking with the rest of us, so that the homeowners here can actually park in the street. But we do have the parking permit situation here. And because of it, we really can't even use our street anymore. The street's basically empty of cars because it's really, really difficult to get those permits. So what Nina said earlier, in our situation, for the situation our community has, it'd be really great for the residents to be able to get the permit without any issue at all. No, how many cars in the garage or whatever. We should be able to park in front of our houses on the street if we want to, and not have to rush at 9 o'clock at night and go, oh my God, I forgot, I parked in the street. I don't want to get a ticket. Kind of a situation, you know, I mean, I live in this house. I should be able to park in the street if I need to, especially when the street's empty. But since Nina covered that, and you're asking me for a magic wand, then there's one item that I want to bring up that I don't think anybody's brought up yet, and that's street sweeping. So I lived in Westminster. They street sweep it at 8 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. Now, I don't know about the rest of you guys on this call, but everybody who has an extra car is parked on the grass, is parked perpendicular on their driveway, and all these weird situations just because they start at 7 instead of 8. I got a couple tickets because I parked in the community area where the pool is because I couldn't park in the street. So since Nina covered my number 1 magic wand issue, my number 2 magic wand would be street sweeper, start at 8 a.m. instead of 7 and save us all a lot of headache. It would really, really be helpful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll definitely be looking into the street sweeping policies and see what we can do to make things easier on folks. So I appreciate you sharing that. Let's move on to Veronica.
Hi, my name is Luis, but my wife and I will both be speaking. We actually live right behind Tustin High School, and we've been here for, I want to say, about 17 years now. Parking wasn't really an issue before until like the past 5 years. And lately we've noticed, since it's just 2 schools back to back, it's just like no houses. We're literally like the only house. And then it's just a bunch of field. A lot of people have been coming to drop off their cars, same thing, and then they drive away. Not only that, but box trucks. We have big moving trucks that are dumped there, and they're left there for weeks. So I don't know if that's inviting other people to come by and say, oh, well, this place looks vacant. There's nobody here. These cars aren't moving. So we've actually had 2 trucks already stolen. We've had our truck was broken into and they took a bunch of our stuff. And then one of my cars was left on bricks and they stole my rims. So we've been having a lot of issues with break-ins and stuff. Also, a lot of, even when I look down the street, I see a lot of shattered windows. I see batteries, and it's a nice area. It's not a bad area, but I've seen batteries stolen out of cars. And it just sucks because I work late. So sometimes I get home at midnight, 2 in the morning, and there's absolutely no parking for me anywhere on the street. So I have to park somewhere really far and then walk. And I leave my car out there knowing that it can get broken into, even though I don't leave anything for people to see. So if I could have a magic wand or anything, I would like at least the parking directly in front of my house. People take that all the time. They park their cars there and leave them for weeks. So I can't even park in front of my own house. And I just feel like, I don't know if they should do some vigilance, if they could, patrol, drive by or do something. But I really don't know, other than maybe same thing with the permit parking. If we can have permits just so we can park our vehicles directly in front of our house, I feel like that would at least for us, I'm sorry, but if somebody else wants to come drop off their car down the street, then that's on them. But I just don't think we should have to park somewhere really far from our house and then have to walk it.
Okay, thank you, Luis. And is your wife going to speak as well?
Well, I mainly just hit all the points for her.
Okay. All right, well, sounds good. We'll move along. I do want to remind everyone, please try and be brief if possible. We have a lot of people to get through. Let's move on to Becky's iPad.
Hi, this is Becky.
Hi, Becky.
Thank you for this. The frustration we've lived here, we're on the south side of First Street, the other side of Old Town, still considered Old Town. And we've lived here a really long time. Unlike it was years ago, we now have people that leave their cars here. The police, we all have a direct line, asking them to come mark cars. But not only that, is how much more crime there is on our street. Just last weekend, our camera picked up a guy at 7:50 breaking a window and stealing things out of a car. There's people walking around our neighborhood at all hours of the night, dropping off cars racing. It's very, very frustrating. I looked into parking permits pre-COVID, and again, when things kind of opened up with the city. And again, 51% of homeowners have to agree to it, which I think is not a problem at all. It's just that we don't feel as safe as we did. We love Tustin, born and raised here, and would like to continue the camaraderie that we have on our street. We don't know these people. We're sorry they don't have a parking place, but neither do we. We have cars blocking our driveway. I could go on and on. But I'm hoping that there's an answer because it is so frustrating for all of us. And there's been some really good ideas. So hopefully we can come to a decision to make it what it once was.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate you being here. Let's move to Mello.
Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did I
live,
sound squeaky?
what was that? I live right here on McFadden and Myrtle, and obviously it's a huge residential area. Recently, well, today I got a ticket because I parked north of Myrtle on McFadden, and it's a permit area. I think it's zone 2. And, I didn't move my car in time because I got home late from work and I'm tired. And I slept through my alarm to try to beat Uncle Sam from giving me a ticket. And, it's just ridiculous. Like, I mean, my opinion would be just eliminate the permit and let people park. But I know, it's all a business and Uncle Sam wants their money. So I would suggest, at least charging us like, $20 a month or whatever to park in the housing areas, because I can't, like everybody else, I can't find parking once I'm back home because I get off late, and I don't want to park my car a mile or two away and have to walk back here. So sometimes to prevent that, I park, well, which is most of the time I have to park over there or on the red curbs, just so I won't have to walk that far and go around in circles trying to find the parking. So it's and when I saw the map of the permitted parking, it's only a few, and that's one of them. And I'm like, there's no cars on the streets because obviously you have to have a permit. But people park there. The few people that park there, and then they move their cars whenever they need to before they get a ticket. So I think that will solve a problem here on this street. And I'm just tired of tickets. I already got like 5 in 2 months.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. We definitely want to make it easier for you where you're not getting tickets all the time.
So like,
for sharing.
You guys saying it's gonna take, until September. It's like we need it right now, not not till next year. Like, but hopefully, I'm everybody's complaining, so hopefully that changes fast. So, but thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to, let's see. Deborah, are you there? I think you were having trouble raising your hand.
No, I didn't mean to raise my hand. I'm just having trouble keeping my Wi-Fi, so I'm going to leave the meeting, but thank you for everything.
Thank you. All right. How about Martina? I see Martina's iPhone.
Yes, hi, my name is Martina. I live in William Street and I hear all the issues that everybody has, but the people doesn't understand that, like, for example, us, we are a family of 4. my husband, me, and 2 kids, that they're gonna start driving like pretty soon. So we need 4 cars. And in the apartment complex, we're just allowed to have 2 cars. So what we gonna do with the other 2? I mean, and it's not just me. We have thousands of family with the same problem. I mean, we just live 4 people in an apartment, but we don't find parking in all the street is full, like in the morning and mid of day, night, overnight, all the time. The street is full all the time. So what we have to do, we need to go look for a parking space like blocks away from our house. And I know that people doesn't want to have anybody else in front of their house, but what we need to do then, what we have to do, what solutions do you have for us? Because the problem mostly is for the apartments. And in this street is full of apartments.
Mhm. Thank you, Martina. That's really helpful for us to hear that. Just let's all be mindful of time. We're really running short. We're wrapping up at 7:30, so let's keep everything brief if possible. How about, there's Samsung SM, I don't know your name. I see you in the top right of my screen. There you are. What's your magic wand? You might have to unmute.
Is enforcement. And the reason what I'm saying about is enforcement is we have permit parking, but I had a car, in fact, 2 of them parked for a week without moving, and he called the police. Then they've got 72 hours from the week they've already been parked there illegally, which I know is the law, but it all stems to enforcement. And it starts with the city making people park in their garage, even though some people use it for storage. The meaning of a garage is a building housing for cars or vehicles. They don't do that. So where do they park? They park on the street. There's a complex on 6th Street in between B and Pacific that the city okayed the parking, but every evening that street is completely packed. Then the overflow goes on to Pacific Street. So I think the key to this is, yeah, continue with the parking permits. I think it's valuable that you do that. But the key is enforcement. If you don't enforce it, it doesn't matter if you have a parking permit or not. Unless the city is just downright rich and they don't need to write tickets and don't need the money. But I don't see that. I have family in law enforcement in our nearby city of Santa Ana. And they both have told me, if we had the parking problem that you have here in some of the places in Santa Ana, we would ticket and tow right away. But the key is enforcement. People got to use their garages. They don't want to use their garages because they're renting them out to people for bedrooms or storage or whatever. But it's got to be enforced. I mean, you can drive down the street and see people parked there for a week at a time, and then you got to wait to call. And then when you call, then it's another 72 hours. So my question is, if they're driving around, they don't see a car with a parking permit, what difference would it make if they were parked there 72 hours or a week? They should still get a ticket. So the key is enforcement. And I feel bad for a lot of people that have cars parked on their street and dropped off and someone picking them up. We had that as well. But that's my magic wand is enforcement, because the condos well over the amount of parking that they need. But thank you guys very much.
Thank
It's very
you.
informative. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. And I did get a message from Monica, our translator. She's hoping to address one of our comments. Are you?
Hi, good evening, everyone. This next comment is from Miss Ana Velázquez. La señora Ana Velázquez dice lo siguiente: yo vivo en San Juan Street, atrás de la escuela Tustin, y los vecinos utilizan los botes de basura para apartar estacionamiento frente a mi casa, y esto no debería de ser permitido. Me gustaría que visitaran esta calle para que vean cómo los botes de basura son utilizados para eso. Veo también que tienen muchos carros y es difícil encontrar un estacionamiento en la calle. In English, Miss Ana Velasquez lives on San Juan Street behind the Tustin School, and neighbors utilize trash cans to save parking in front of my home, and I don't believe this should be permitted. I would like for somebody to visit this street specifically so that you can see for yourselves how these trash cans are being utilized. I also see or observe that they have many cars and it is very difficult to find parking on that street. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll definitely take note of that particular location and follow up. Okay, so moving on, Yolanda Valdez, I see your hand is up.
Yes, hello. I also live next to McFadden, as Mello had mentioned. He didn't say whether he lived in the neighborhood or not. Where I live, there's tons of apartments and they tend to park in our area and they'll stay overnight. Somebody else mentioned trash and stuff. I don't want them to get rid of the parking permits. We love the parking permits. I love the virtual idea. I think that's great because I've also heard from other neighbors that people actually sell their parking permits. So that way, if you have virtual ones, hopefully they won't be able to sell them. And if you open it to other residents, like I said, to the apartments, then you're inviting people. As it is, we have the parking permit, but when they're here until they have to leave, we find so much trash. We find beer bottles, water bottles, dirty diapers, food. I've caught people dumping their trash, people leaving 3 or 4 cars or work cars. I've caught people doing drugs, having sex. My neighbor has people partying all in front of her house all hours of the night. And these are people from the apartments that are across the way. And I'm sorry they don't have enough parking, but I'm sorry I don't understand how their problem becomes our problem.
It's not.
And I think they should find like people have mentioned, the building parking lots, or there's a bunch of empty lots here in Tustin they can do something with and have them pay for it. Whoever wants to park there, have them pay for it. But I really think that they should please don't get rid of the parking permits. We definitely need the parking permits. And I just ask that you please don't remove that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I don't know how they work.
Let's move on to Catherine Hansen. Catherine.
Okay, there I am.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great meeting. I had no idea there were so many issues, but I'm still going to say what I'd like to say. I grew up in a town in New York, right on Long Island, right outside of New York City, similar to where we are here in relation to Los Angeles. It was a suburb. And they didn't allow parking. This was back in the 50s and 60s. I'm not asking you to do the math because the number is pretty high because I'm older than a lot of people here. But they didn't allow parking on the streets at night between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And that is still the case today. Citywide, no parking on the streets between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And everybody scrambled around to figure out a way to do that. We had 3 cars. Our property was 40 feet by 100 feet. That was the size of the parcel. And we had a narrow little driveway and a little English tutor home. And we squeezed those cars with 3 cars we had to juggle in that driveway. And we did it. You know, people are, as others have said, are using their garage for storage. You know, people are treating public parking as if it's an unlimited resource when it isn't. And I think as a city, we're coming against that wall because there are just too many cars in the city. And one of the things too, you know, a single family home can limit themselves to the number of cars that fit on their property. And if they want to use their front yard and convert it into a parking space and put bushes around it and whatever, or whatever they want to do to fit another parking space, they can figure it out. You know, this is the way I feel, because we don't have unlimited space available for everybody and everybody's wants and needs. So what I will even carry that to this point, because where I live, there are two condo complexes on the street. And around the corner, there's an apartment complex. And the manager of that complex has told his people that I believe what it is that the third car is considered a guest. And he's told them to park on my street because there are no other streets to park on. So they all come over here. And with all the associated problems that have mentioned. And I have talked to the management of that apartment complex, and I feel very strongly about this, that they should not allow more cars on their property than they can fit in the garages and in the driveways and the parking spaces. Even if that means not renting a couple of the units. Doggone it, you know, they don't have unlimited right to use all the parking so that they can make big bucks on their apartment complex. That's their business, but they want to push their business costs onto the neighborhood. You know, I feel very strongly about that they should limit themselves to the number of cars that they can fit on their property, even if it means modifying their property. I've walked around the property, and you know, I'm not an engineer to know for sure, but it looks to me as if there are areas on the apartment complex's property where they could convert some grassy areas into parking spaces. You know, it would take some cost. You know, they don't want the cost, they want to make the money. So, you know, and I've mentioned it to them that they could limit the numbers of people that they rent to. They could limit the number of cars per unit. You know, they could do that. So anyway, I've had a lot of problems here from parking. And again, it's just been like within the last 5 years. Someone else said that. That's kind of a magic number, but there have been a lot of problems. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. So my magic one would be stop parking on the streets of Tustin from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and let it be at that, and let people scramble around and figure it out.
All right.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here. All right, next I see Jocelyn Ruiz.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, first, thank you so much for this meeting. Really quick though, about I know that they mentioned that there was gonna be a couple more meetings. For those meetings, is it always gonna be a limit of 100 people that can come into the meeting and that's it, or?
No, we'll make sure that we address that issue. We apologize for that today. Luckily, it looks like we're hovering just below 100, so I think it has resolved itself, but we'll make sure to expand that in the future meetings.
Okay, see, yeah, I was just having an issue for, I'm assuming, the first half to get in because it was over, so it wouldn't let me. But I mean, I hear everyone out. I understand. I believe Mello had mentioned that he lives on Myrtle. I also live on Myrtle. It's weird because we like I don't know if it would be North Myrtle, but I live on South Myrtle, so it's basically the street that's all the apartments, and right across is basically all the houses, and they have a lot of parking, and it's yeah, with permit. I understand you can't park there from 2 a.m. to 6. And I mean, I'm all for, I don't mind the permits. I would just wish that if it was possible to kind of expand on that and give some residents from across, because we're literally the same street, it's just right across, a couple of permits. That way we're able to park, because like it was mentioned, like families are growing, kids start to, you know, drive. So obviously you're gonna need another car. You can't be limited to only one car. And it's kind of hard to find parking at certain times of the days. Even people that don't like live on that street or in those apartments, like you have apartments like people living in Pasadena or even further, or apartments in Walnut, they come and park on our street on Myrtle, and they don't even, like, they don't live there, which I'm assuming they're having the same problem, but it's just, it makes it hard on us as well to find parking. So, and I know they said like, let us scramble with it, but I mean, we already are, and we've been scrambling with it. It's hard to find parking. And I get at least, yeah, the residents of houses have their parking in front of their house at least. That's understandable, but they also have, you know, their garages and driveways, and in apartments, we don't have that. We do have a garage, and I understand not many use their garage, which sometimes, you know, it's very useful to have it empty so you can put your car in. But I mean, everybody's situation is really different, but you know, we don't have driveways or garages at front where we can fit all our cars. And so it's very limited on our street. And I know it's happening on multiple streets, and we obviously don't want to be parking miles away and having to go get our car after. And it's just for, you know, overnight. We move our cars every single day. We got to go to work, we got to go to school. So it's not like we're leaving them for weeks. So it would really just help a lot.
All right, great. Thank you. And sorry, we're running low on time, so I encourage everyone to post in the chat too and take the online survey if we don't have time to get to you. But let's move on to Rob Allen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I live at like Red Hill and Bryan off a street called Diamond Head, where I border up next to condos. My family's been there since '64. And so we have an issue when they expanded Red Hill out to 3 lanes, and then it's taken away the parking from those condos where they're overflowing into the neighborhood now. But, you know, my issue stems from like the police, they don't do the enforcement like they're supposed to. So it's like, you know, if you go to a permit system, are they actually going to enforce it? Because they don't enforce parking in front of fire hydrants, a 72-hour limit, parking on curbs, any of that issue. You know, that's a constant battle we're having with them. And because they don't enforce that, it brings in a transient group, which now leads to crime, where you got people checking door handles, jumping the fence, trespassing through the yard. It's kind of like one problem leads to another problem. And so like we're seeing that really go downhill. And as you put this parking permit thing into place, like our neighborhood voted it down out of 37 homes. I believe we needed 27 to get it. But the problem with the parking permit is you penalize the homeowners. You know, for example, my house has 2 garage parking spaces, 2 driveway spots. So until I hit vehicle number 5, I don't get a street parking spot at my house. So, you know, that's an issue. And like, for example, and I actually have 5 cars. 1 car isn't registered right now. So that kind of plays in. Does that count as a car in my garage? It's kind of, it's just, it penalizes a homeowner in a way, the current parking situation. So, I mean, I think it needs to be, you know, a homeowner needs to have a little bit of an advantage for, you know, what we have versus, you know, the condo, like the condos next to me have 3 assigned parking spaces per unit. So it takes them vehicle number 4 before they push into my neighborhood. And when they come over there, they're very disrespectful, you know, like, and that's where our problem lies is, you know, they're not parking their car there and you know, they're coming over and they're littering, they're blasting their music, you know, they're up all hours of the night where they're turning around the driveway when they do their 3-point turns. And that's where our frustration as a homeowner, you know, goes with all these people in the neighborhood. And as you add in more of these parking permits and you keep pushing them, all you're doing is you're pushing them into a different part of the city from where they are now. So, you know, we have that problem as well. So, I mean, that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Great, thank you. How about Steph?
Hi there. I live over in Tustin Field 1, which is just an attached townhome complex. And the parking here isn't regulated with the permit yet. It has a 72-hour parking limit outside. I moved here from Austin, Texas with 3 other people who I also work with, who also live with me in this townhome, which has a 2-car garage, which is utilized. But for the amount of people in this complex, there simply isn't enough parking, including garage spots. Which then overflows to the other complexes like Tustin Field 2, which I believe a nice lady brought up earlier, which isn't fair to that complex at all. We also have apartments across the street that also park inside of our complex parking, which then displaces us on top of people double parking to save spots for their friends who don't live here. So what I have to do now is I currently park at the Tustin train station and walk every night at 12 o'clock in the morning because I work late nights bartending, and I have to walk 20 minutes in the dark underneath Jamboree just to get home, which is super scary and not safe. I don't have a solution for this, unfortunately, but I guess I'm just like really sad because I didn't know what I was moving into when I signed the lease. And I'm just honestly afraid for my safety and dread coming home every night. I've actually spent the night at my work because there wasn't enough parking in my complex.
Wow.
If I could wave a magic wand, I would say I just honestly wish I didn't sign the lease here, but I wish I didn't have to worry anymore, like about coming home. And I just honestly wish a lot would open up somewhere that would just allow parking, so I didn't have to be afraid that I was going to get mugged coming home.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's really an important consideration, is safety. We want to make sure, especially for people arriving home later in the evening, that you're not having to walk too far. We probably only have time for one more. I'm so sorry, people. Let's end with Danielle S. and then we'll wrap up after that.
Hi, my name's Danielle. I'm going to keep it brief. I think that residents should be encouraged to use the parking that they have on site, be it their garage, driveways, etc., because otherwise there is not enough parking for everyone. As somebody else mentioned, it's not an endless resource, it is limited. So I do think that people should be strongly encouraged to use the parking that they have available before they're given a permit to park on the street. Where I live, street sweeping is the same day, same time on both sides of the street. I think it's Fridays at 7 a.m. It would be really nice if it was either alternating Fridays, like one side the second and fourth Friday, the other side the first and third Friday, because everyone that does park on the street literally has nowhere to move their car because it's the same day, same time on both sides of the street. I don't think that we should get rid of the permit parking because I think it prevents people that don't live here from parking on the street overnight, and it deters people from dumping their cars. So I would strongly encourage you guys to not get rid of the permit program, just to make it more accessible to residents. And that's it.
All right, thank you. And I do apologize. We had a lot more attendees than we expected. So I really appreciate you all for being here today and spending your evening talking about parking. It's been really helpful to hear all of your different perspectives. And I do encourage you once again, since we didn't have a chance to get to everyone, we will have future meetings. We'll expand the cap and maybe set aside some extra time as well. You're also welcome to email us. I know Kelly has posted our contact information in the chat a few times. So I highly encourage you to reach out and take the online survey as well. We have both English and Spanish versions of the online survey. And the parking magic wand is one of the questions in the survey as well. And so if you didn't get a chance to share today, you're welcome to do it there. We will be reading through all of the responses, of course. So yeah, I just want to thank you all. And Chris, did you have any last words while we wrap up?
Yeah, let me turn it on here. Well, thank you everybody for attending. You know, I think at the end of the day, we're going to try our very best to make everybody happy, but I know upfront we won't be able to. So just hang in there. We'll see what we come up with. This has been very challenging. We sure don't want to pit people against each other. And so we're going to try to prevent that as much as we can. So again, thank you for attending and spending your evening with us.
Yes, thank you all. And we'll definitely be in touch with future opportunities for input, especially as we start to draft our recommendations. So thank you all and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.